Before working in Photoshop, it's a good idea to have a rough understanding of how it works and what the interface looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it. I'm using CS6, which is the last version that didn't require a subscription fee. If you're using CC or a different version, there's not really any huge differences related to what we're going to go over right now. The base interface is more or less the same. So once it opens, this is what you should see more or less. We'll talk a little bit about why there might be some differences in a moment. So on the left side here, you have the Tools panel or the Tools window. And if we click on that little arrow, it can change the style from sort of a single column to a 2-column. I'll switch to 2-column just because then I can make this a little bit smaller and a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. At the top, we have the Options window. I don't really think of it as options. I don't really like that word for it because to me, it's not options, it's more of properties. Each tool that we click on will change what is displayed in the options window, which to me is sort of more of like the properties that you're currently using for that tool. On the bottom, we have the option to see the mini bridge as well as the timeline. The timeline is used for animation. The mini bridge is a way to sort of access a more compact version of bridge, or not quite the full version of bridge, but essentially bridge is how you can organize or manage some of your different files. You don't have to use really either of them. Timeline, well, you'll use timeline if you decide to work with animation, but for starters, probably not. Okay, now on the right, this might or probably does look a little bit differently from yours. So the reason being is that I don't currently have the default windows open. So at the top here, it says Essentials, and there's new in CS6, 3D. There's a couple different ones in here, and I can change which ones, and it will change those panels. Now right now, it says I'm in Essentials, but I've closed or opened some different things. So if I tell it to reset, this is probably what you see. If you're in a different one, well, it's going to have different panels. To start with, it's probably the most useful to stick with Essentials, and as you get more comfortable with it, you can try out some of the other ones. In Essentials, on the right side, you have these 3 windows, or panels as I tend to think about them. You have color, which is by default an HSB, but you can change that to like RGB or CMYK or something else if you're more comfortable with it. You have swatches next to it, which are like saved colors, and you can create your own, which will pull from whatever color you currently have over here. Speaking of which, down here you do have 2 different colors. You have the foreground color and the background color, and you can switch them easily. You can double click to get your picker, and etc. So let's go back to color. You have adjustments here and styles next to it, and I'll show those in a moment. And then the layers panel. The layers panel is pretty important, and we'll go into more detail on layers in its own video following this one. Here we have history, and here we have properties. So to show much more of this, we kind of need to actually have something that we're working with. So let's open a new document. Right now, this is not a document. This is not a canvas. There's nothing on here to work with. Trying to use the paintbrush here, I can't draw. I don't have a canvas. At the top of your screen, you do have the typical overhead menu, which has a lot of the stuff that you would expect. You do have window up here, which lets you choose which windows you have open. So like the layers there, and I can open new ones like layer comps or measurement log or navigator. And if I end up like doing something weird and I have like weird stuff open, I can always go back and tell it to reset the essentials here, or I can also do it up here in the workspace. The more important reason right now to mention this overhead menu is because I can create a new document, which is what I need to do. You have different page sizes here, so international page sizes, or US paper, or photo, or typical web sizes, or etc. There's quite a few here, and of course you can always type in your own. So 8.5 by 11, this is like a profile orientation page, your typical like American printer paper size. But this is, like I said, profile. So if we want it to be landscape, I can just switch these around. It is currently set as 300 resolution, which is the recommended resolution for printing nice quality, but I can change that. If I don't want to work with inches as my measurement, I can change that as well. But for right now, this is fine. It doesn't really matter because we're just looking at things. So I'm going to press OK. And now I can actually paint. Up here in the options window, I can change some of the properties of this, like make the brush softer, maybe go down here and change the color. I'll just switch them for right now. And you can see here that I'm drawing on the background. If you have worked with Illustrator, you know that you can just grab things and move them around. But Photoshop doesn't really work that way. These are not objects, these are actually pixels. If I zoom in enough, you will actually see the pixel grid. There we go, there's the pixel grid. These aren't objects. It's not a blue line that I just made. Instead, it is a bunch of dots that are next to each other. And if I can go and find maybe the hard edge of the green. Here we go. So that blue was rather soft, right? So this soft edge, it's kind of hard to see what I'm talking about with the pixel grid because it's soft, it gradually fades. But if we go to like this hard edge on the green, you can see the fade is created, by lighter dots of green. It's not a nice round edge, it's not a sharp edge like we have with a vector-based format. So this is because Photoshop is a raster-based format. It's a bitmap. It is basically a giant table of little dots side by side that happen to look like things when you have enough of them in the right arrangement. And that being said, that's why we can't really just grab and move things, because it's not an object, it's a bunch of dots next to each other. So the green dots that I colored over with this blue, those are gone. And the white dots that I colored over with both are also gone. They're gone. Now I can, on the right side here, click History, and I can go back in time, but I can only go back so far. If I color enough, let's maybe choose a new color. I don't know what I'm creating here, some sort of weird insect or something, I suppose. Maybe we'll give him some orange wings. Didn't realize that was still a soft brush. Alright, did I do enough? I don't think I've quite done enough yet. Let's maybe make some little blue dots on his wings here. There we go. Now I've done enough. So if I go all the way back up here, I can't go back to the start. Well, I can go way back to the start, but I'm missing the steps in between. So Photoshop will only record so many like states of history, and we can change that up here in our preferences. So if we switch to performance, we can change that, but the more you have, the more RAM it's going to eat up. So depending on the power and the age of your machine, you might not want to go above this. You actually might want to drop it down depending on what you have. So that's the history window, and we can actually also use the history brush with it, which is kind of cool because we could go all the way here and then mark this to set the source of the history brush, and now if we color, it will erase, or well, it's sort of erasing to that point in history, which is sort of a cool idea. I'm not really sure how useful it would be for most things, but it's interesting. The adjustments, if we try this now, allows you to make big adjustments to basically the whole screen. So like levels changes the lightness, we can play with hue and saturation. So these are kind of fun. There's a lot to go over with these, so they really deserve their own video, but that's what they are. Styles will change the style of something. This requires really using layers. You should be using layers anyways. I've kind of skipped over layers because they really require their own video to me. But if I just make a blue dot here on a new layer and I play with some of these styles, you can see what it does. It sort of overrides what I had created and adds a new style to it. These are pretty old and they look pretty cheesy, but there are still some cool things you can do with them if you understand them well. You can now see down here in my layers panel, I have quite a few layers. I have the original background layer, which I colored everything on. The adjustment layers have added on top, and then I created that new layer to show the styles off. Now, to zoom in to show like the pixel grid, I was using Command plus, which on a PC would be Control plus. To zoom out, Command minus or Control minus. And if you want to jump back to the top level, Command 0 will make whatever you're working on fit the size of your current window. You can also see your current zoom level down here, and you can actually type it in, so I could go to like 50%. You can see it here as well in the name of your file, but we can't change it here. So either use the shortcuts, or use this, or you can also use the zoom tool, which will zoom in, or if you hold Option on the Mac, you can zoom out. You can also hold down and sort of drag left or right. So that's essentially the interface for Photoshop. Each thing, of course, has more we can do with it, but without making a super long video, it's really hard to cover them adequately. Having that understood, you can probably start playing with some of the different tutorials that are out there available, or watch more videos to learn more specifically about some of these individual windows or individual tools.